Here's to whiskey kisses, the peaty taste of sin.
Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. I am your host, as ever, Adam Bradshaw, and it is a delight to see you once again in this new year. Actually, funnily enough, I think I'm recording this on Chinese New Year, which is the perfect time, I guess, to talk about some Chinese whiskey. So yes, the Whisky Festival, the 2025 Victoria Whisky Festival is in the rearview mirror, and it was absolutely incredible. The spirits were high. The excitement was there. It was just a wonderful occasion of bringing together like-minded people for a good few drams. And we're already planning next year's. But one of the most talked about things of the festival was the debut of these whiskies. In fact, these three whiskies were by far and away the best-selling whiskies at our pop-up store. In fact, one of them's almost sold out already, despite the fact that we bought all of it that has, I think, ever been exported outside of China. Yeah. I can feel a few of you. I can actually hear you over the internet scratching your head at the idea of a Chinese whiskey. It makes sense, though, right? The market in China for whiskey is absolutely huge. It's one of the big reasons that whiskey has become more expensive over the last few years. So it stands to reason that they'd start trying to make their own. And that is exactly the case. In 2011, these guys, they started making whiskey for the first time. And actually, they founded the distillery. They might not have started making whiskey straight away. I think they might have started making whiskey in 2013, come to think of it, because they don't just make whiskey. So this is... I'm still yet to get 100% confirmation on the pronunciation of this, but I believe it's supposed to be Gisbelle, which is... yes, a very strange name for a Chinese whiskey. It's very French sounding. The presenter at the festival kept pronouncing it Gisbelle, which also works quite nicely. Some people have just been referring to it as Gisbelle. Not so keen on that one. So either the really overly French je, like je m'appelle, Gisbelle, or a soft G. I think either of those work. But let's face it, we are the very first store to ever get these whiskies outside of China. So however we start pronouncing it is probably how the rest of the world will then start pronouncing it once word gets out. So we can be the trendsetters here. So up to you guys. I want to see in the comments, do you prefer the soft j or the hard g? Let's find out. Either way, what the hell does it mean? They don't really talk about that. The only thing I could find on the internet for what does Gisbelle mean is that it's a baby name, apparently quite popular in the US right now. It's kind of like a Ghislaine kind of, and Belle meaning the French for like beautiful, kind of hybrid that's become somewhat popular. Babynames.com helped me out with that one. And apparently it means a beautiful pledge. So I have a feeling that someone in the marketing department wanted to find a word that in the international market would be kind of beautiful and meaningful, and they landed on Gisbelle. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think I'm leaning towards Gisbelle as a pronunciation. Honestly, partially because it reminds me of a character from Robin Hood, Gisborne, who was pretty badass. But yeah, crazy distillery, crazy whiskies, crazy story about how I got these whiskies. In essence, this should have never happened. They exported them to Canada they weren't intending them to be available for retail originally. The first batch that came through last summer. And I think the intention was that the importers were going to buy them all themselves and then distribute them as sort of corporate gifts and things, right? That didn't quite end up to plan because I pinched them. I ordered them myself from the warehouse, knowing absolutely nothing about them. And at the time, they weren't even called Gisbelle or Gisbelle. They were called Symbol. Now, they've changed their branding a little bit since then. And I basically bought a case of each of them to see what on earth was going on. And then they arrived, and there was absolutely no information. I tried using Google Translate on the back, and it was hilarious. And I didn't really know anything about them. So we tried them in like some private whiskey clubs, and it turned out actually pretty good. And then we bought more, and then we sold out of those. And thankfully, the importers actually got in touch with me. I think partially to figure out why on earth I bought their whiskey, because they weren't intending for it to be to sale. So then I passed on like some of the comments and the praise from people that have tried it and bought it and liked it. And they were amazed. They didn't think that these whiskies would be appreciated by people not from China, because these were very, very much designed for the Chinese palate. So to have Westerners and people from all different backgrounds try these and be kind of impressed and at the very least intrigued by them, I think they were a little bit confused by that. So then we talked about, well, maybe come to the Victoria Whisky Festival. Maybe bring another shipment of stuff, and we'll do the same thing. We'll buy it all again. So make sure that it's worth your while. So we did that. The Strath bought every single bottle of all three of these whiskies that has ever been exported outside of China, to the best of my knowledge, which is pretty damn cool. So we launched them at a tasting on Thursday night, and the people in attendance were, they enjoyed themselves. They were so confused and full of questions, and it was great. I think the thing that really has endeared me towards this distillery is from knowing nothing about them. Every time I get more information, I like them even more. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you kind of wish you could go back before you knew how the sausage was made. But in this case, every time I learn more information about them, I'm like, oh, interesting. That's really cool. Because they're not trying to do things in a way that just copies other people. They're doing it quintessentially their own way. This is not only designed for the Chinese palate, but very much Chinese in its sort of manufacturing techniques and its ideals as well, which is really cool. And I've been talking far too long without actually opening one of these whiskies, so I'm going to start off with this guy. And before I do, I should mention, part of the reason I'm making this video is that these three whiskies, that are, available only at the Strath worldwide right now, outside of China, are our in-store drams this month. So January 2025, as of the launch of this video, for the next couple of months, you can come into our store and try these. These two will be available for free, and this one will be a couple of bucks to try, unless you're a Strath Premium member, and then it's included in your subscription. So we're going to try this one first. And this was by far and away the most popular on the Thursday. In fact, of the 60 bottles that were brought in, I believe we only have 12 left at the time of recording, which is kind of wild. So let's talk about this. This is the, it's hard to say because there's no English on it. There's a little sticker on the side, though, to help me out. This is the Kow Edition. This is a 6-year-old single malt whiskey that has been matured in sherry casks. But sherry casks like no other. One of the wonderful things when I was being given some information early on is they described their casks as carved castle casks, and that seems to be a direct translation for like a phrase that essentially means like made with utmost care and attention. But they are also really interesting casks. I've got a photograph of one of their sort of warehouses or their cask maturation places. I'll flash up on the screen right now. They are bigger at the bottom than they are at the top. And I'm not entirely sure 100% why that is. My best guess is if you look at them, they're actually on individual little pallets, which means you can move them around easier. And they're not going to fall over as easily because the bottom's bigger than the top. It's a more stable shape, which is very clever, actually. I'm really intrigued by that, and I'm surprised I've not seen sort of that kind of innovation in cask shape before. And it's possibly just because everyone's been doing it the way it's always been done, handmade by, old school coopers for hundreds and hundreds of years. Maybe that kind of innovation, no one thought to innovate the shape of a cask in the last couple of hundred years. I think is pretty neat. So they do that shape of cask, and apparently this one is ex-sherry. It is white oak. So, the standard sort of oak that we use, like American oak sort of style. Apparently. 6 years aged. This is 100% malted barley. It is a single malt. And that barley was grown in Australia. And that's something that like I say, I keep learning more information. That's something I only just learnt recently, because a lot of language barriers and understanding makes it, a little bit more difficult sometimes to pass the information. We originally thought that it was Chinese barley, but I believe now that is Australian barley that is processed in China. I think it's malted in China, possibly even at their own facility, because they're not just a whiskey distillery. They started off as a brewery and apple brandy place, and we'll get into the apple brandy a little bit later. So it's probably malted in-house, but I believe it's at least malted locally. But it is Australian-grown barley, which is kind of interesting in itself. So presentation-wise, obviously lovely, and it's about to get even lovelier. But there is one weird thing about specifically just this whiskey. The others don't have this issue. You kind of have to destroy the box a little to get into it. You have to push in here, and then there's this little plastic tab that allows you to open the thing. But once you do that, you've got a hole in your thing. It's very, very odd. But here we go. That is a pretty good presentation, I would say, and very Chinese looking, isn't it? So, Gisbelle, however we want to go with, is located in Yantai, and that is a very sort of fertile part of China. A lot of fruit growing happens there, a lot of apple orchards. It's known for its like rugged coastline and beautiful sort of temperate but humid weather. They sent me a little video. It's all symbol branded rather than Gisbelle, so I haven't shared any clips from the video yet. But they show sort of part of the location, and they also describe it as China's Speyside, which I thought was kind of interesting. But yeah, that's gorgeous, isn't it? Yeah. I'm going to crack into it and see what we're into here. So a little bit more information about the distillation style. It is pot still distillation. It is triple distillation. And I've got a picture of the stills that I'm going to throw up right now. Could give me an excuse to cut away so that I can find a knife to be able to open this thing. Oh no, wait, there's serration on the other side. I can't follow instructions. There's serration. There we go. But yeah, as you can see. Really interesting style stills, kind of a unique shape and kind of built into the base like some of the more modern stills are. Very cool. They use an extra long fermentation as well. And not only is it extra long, it's 128 hours. And, most Scottish distilleries are 48 to 72. So 128 is a huge increase. The distilleries that are known in Scotland for having longer fermentation include like Springbank and Ben Nevis. And part of the thing that it does is it gives you an extra fruity, tropical fruit kind of light flavor. The other thing that's interesting there is that they have a dual yeast process. So they use two different types of yeasts, one of which they have sort of custom created for the purpose. That is, it's really good at quick fermentation, but also alcohol tolerant, so it doesn't just die off as soon as the alcohol gets to a certain level. So it allows, not only is it 128 hours, it's a sped up 128 hours as well. So extra light, extra fruity. And that triple distillation is going to help with that too. And they're quite a sizable distillery. Here's a shot of the distillery itself. It's a big production. They make a lot of whiskey. They're going big off the bat, as often these big Chinese projects do. And like I said, they are a brewery as well. They do make apple brandy as well. But apparently their whiskey output is 2.8 million litres a year, which puts them at about the same size as Talisker, or like just above Lagavulin. That's huge. They've got the market for it. Let's, All right. Ready for the uncorking? Oh, satisfying. And big decanter glass lid. Oh. I almost want to suggest to them, like these bottles, a lot of people were buying the bottles as a decanter. I almost want to suggest that they should provide a normal cork, but also a decanter lid so that people can reuse the bottles, because you don't really want to use a cork lid after it's been opened, but I don't know, maybe. So I tried this on that Thursday night alongside everyone else, and it was a really interesting sherry cask experience. Because it's a much lighter, brighter sherry experience. I'm so used to in Scotland, most of the time when you get a sherry cask whiskey, it's got these big sort of stewed Christmas cake fruit kind of spicy things going on. Lots of prunes and dates and figs and cinnamon and clove. This is a different beast. This is tropical fruit. This is pineapple. This is guava. This is grapefruit peel. This is all kinds of interesting, lighter fruit flavors. And it's unlike any sherry cask whiskey I've ever had, but it's still not like, it doesn't feel weird. It's not that this can't be sherry cask whiskey. It's that this is a twist on sherry cask whiskey that I was not expecting. Almonds. There's this sort of sour tomatillo kind of a thing going on at the back as well. Yeah, it's this big, light, sweet and sour flavor profile, which I think captured a lot of people's attention because it's not a flavor profile that a lot of sort of old world distilleries go for anymore. It's not the darling. Like, in the last few years, it feels like the whiskey community has been going for bigger, bolder flavors, and there's been less of a concentrated effort to innovate on lighter, softer flavors, brighter whiskies like this. So I think this is well placed and well timed. I think people are coming around to this style of whiskey, and like I said, we sold 48 bottles of this in 3 days. That's pretty good. It is, of course, bottled for the Chinese market, so it's not cask strength. I have had talks with the importers, and we are working on maybe doing a cask strength or even single cask edition in the future for our market here. But this is 43%. So it's above the legal minimum, 40, but it's not a huge, voluminous alcohol bomb by any stretch of the imagination. And at 6 years old, it is very youthful still. Like, they're very proud of the fact that they won't release any whiskey under 4, because I think they honed in far too much on the legal minimum in Scotland of being 3, and we're like, we can beat that, and we'll make sure that it's older than that. I don't know if they fully understand that 6 is still considered quite young. But on the flip side, they're a brand new distillery. Like, they've only been around for just over a decade, so for them, 6 is very old. But it does have that youthful kick of a 6-year-old whiskey, which is often, I would say, plays better with a peated whiskey. But I am very, very surprised at how light and bright and approachable this is for a 6-year-old whiskey. You'd think, like, I often want to equate it to an Irish whiskey because it's got that lightness, it's got that triple distilled. But it's not. It's a different beast. It is a little bit more of like a hot climate style whiskey, but toned down, like a tamed Cavalan almost. Or just like a super tropical Paul John. It's really, it's a really cool, interesting whiskey. I quite like it. And I like it, it's the quality is there and it shows a lot of promise. But I like it for being brave and sort of innovative. And I like it for being different. Because in a world full of so much variety of whiskey, I'm always surprised when something truly unique comes along. And this absolutely fits that bill. So yeah, come along to the store and try it. By the time you come to the store, it might already be sold out because we are, pretty slim. But you can pick up a bottle while stocks last, in store and online. And here's the kicker. It's $65.13 Canadian, which is pretty damn good for a whiskey of this intrigue and presentation. And I think that's part of the reason it sold so well. So yeah, you can get it online right now at strathliquor.com. Just search Gisbelle or Kundow or up in the search bar, or go to the Whiskey Folk page and you'll find under featured whiskies, because of course this is a featured whiskey, which means that all of our 1,300 plus members of Whiskey Folk for our whiskey club here in Victoria, you can get this for 10% off, which means that it's actually only $58.62 after the discount. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. All right, so we've done the sherry flavor. So I should mention as well, they seem to really like numbers and quantifying things. I don't know if that's part of like Chinese culture or just this distillery. They mention a lot in their information about the 5543 or something process, or 2 at the end, because it's like we do this number of times, this number of times, and there's the 3 zeros. Oh yeah. No additions, no added flavors or colorings or anything in this. There is chill filtration because it's low ABV and it's for the consumer market that appreciates that kind of treatment. But yeah, nothing is added. There's no fake coloring. There's no fake flavor, which is really nice. But they talk about a lot 5 flavor profiles that they're aiming for. And in fact, the tasting that we had at the festival showcased these 3 whiskies, but 2 more as well. The 5 flavor profiles of Yansai. So there was a tea and a coffee flavor profile, which I'm hoping that we might get some in the next shipment, because they were actually really cool. It sounds weird to have whiskies that are trying to imitate a tea flavor and a coffee flavor, but it's really neat. The tea one had... The cask itself was seasoned with a tea liqueur, like a tea liquor, which is really cool. And then the coffee one, they used a coffee stout cask to get some of those kind of flavors in. So really, again, cool. Playing within the rules of whiskey, but doing so playfully. And then the other 3, which we've got represented here, this is fruit. And then we've got smoke, peat, and then sandalwood is the last one, which we'll get to. So we'll go to the peat next. I know that's a weird order for whiskies, to do peat in the middle and then go unpeated, but I want to do the 2 that you can come in and try for free first, but also work our way up to this guy, because it's a particularly special one. So this is the Shanyu, and out of the 3 new releases here, this is the one that's most familiar, because this is the new version of the simple Shanyu. This is the Gisbelle Shanyu. The main difference is that this has been upped in ABV. So this is 43%, whereas the one that some of you may have tried at a tasting last year that looked very, very similar but said symbol on it was only 40. And we generally enjoy a bump in ABV here at the Strath, here at Whiskey Folks, so it's probably a welcome change for most of our members. And look at that. Does that shape look familiar now? Because we had no idea. When I first presented this whiskey, I had no idea why it was this shape. Is it like a beehive? Is it like some kind of Taoist bell or something? I didn't really understand. It's the shape of the cask, look. It's wider at the bottom. It's the cask that they use. It's a carved castle cask in bottle form. I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, this is the Shanyu. And this is, again, same idea as this in terms of distillation and in terms of fermentation. But what they've done differently here is they've used peated malted barley. And it is peat that is locally sourced in China, which is pretty cool. In fact, this is the first ever peated Chinese whiskey. Again, super cool. Yeah. I really like this one. I bought myself a bottle of the last version at 40%. I probably will buy myself a bottle of this before it sells out as well. The other part of this is the maturation, which is in Mongolian oak. So instead of white oak like they use for the sherry casks here, this is Mongolian oak, which is sourced locally in China. It's Mongolian oak is the genus, so it's Quercus mongolius, or Mongolia. It's written down here somewhere. Quercus Mongolica. Mongolian oak. But it's not from Mongolia, it's from China, apparently. So it is, it's like growing American oak in England, which you can actually do. So it is not actually from Mongolia, but it is Mongolian oak. So this is Mongolian oak, which is really cool, because that is not something that we've really ever seen before in whiskey. From my brief looking into it, I say brief not because I didn't spend long looking into it, I spent a long time looking into it, but there's very little information. What I could tell is that it's quite similar in its makeup to and its effect on whiskey to Mizunara, Japanese oak. So it's going to give it that sort of slightly lighter vanilla honeycomb kind of a thing. But And like cotton candy is kind of one of the other things that Mizunara brings to the table. But one thing that this has over Mizunara is a tighter grain so that you can mature things in it longer without risking leaking. Mizunara is really twisty and really hard to work with as a wood. So you don't really see many whiskies that are matured exclusively in Mizunara because you can't keep it in there for very long without like crossing your fingers really tightly. Whereas these guys can mature it for its entire 6 years in this case in Mongolian oak. And this Mongolian oak is seasoned first for 1.5 years with apple brandy, which is of course made by Gisbelle out of apples grown in the local region in the Ansai area. So yeah, super unique, super wild, unique story. And I really enjoy this one. It's interesting that when we tasted this on Thursday, a lot of the crowd thought this was very, very lightly peated. And I actually thought it was quite noticeable. So I'm going to pay special attention to that today and see, is it actually kind of like peated or is it very, very lightly peated? I still get it on the nose. Not so much of a smokiness, but more of that sort of peat shadowy sort of earthiness. Like, it's like an older peated whiskey where the smoke has dissipated, but other things have remained, which I call the peat shadow. It definitely smells peated, but not aggressively smoky. So if you're often put off by the phenol level of some Scotch peated whiskies or Irish peated whiskies, or anywhere really, you might find this a bit more approachable. But yeah, it smells like a peated whiskey. Like, there's no way around that to me. Like, I don't want to poo-poo people that can't smell it. Like, everyone has their own individual experience with these whiskies, but for me, this is quintessentially peated on the nose. Oh, yeah. And on the palate. Like, I'm going to have to get someone to do this blind for me at some point when I'm not expecting it to really see, because like I know that I'm supposed to be looking for it, but I definitely find it there. Like, not in a super strong way, but in the same kind of peat level, like I said, like old Scotch whiskies like Bowmore 30, something that was not particularly peaty in the first place that has then had time to dissipate. Or maybe like a blended whiskey. It's kind of like the same peat level as, say, Black Bottle, which has a little bit of peated whiskey in it to give it some oomph, give it some character, but it's not the focus, right? And that's kind of the case here as well. There's so many other flavors happening as well. The peat, it may just be that people expect these days, like I was saying before about flavor bombs, people want these big, massive flavorful, like big sherry bomb, big peat bomb, and nuanced, lighter whiskeys like these are getting sort of like forgotten about almost. So I think that might be why people weren't really finding it, because they were expecting, a Lagavulin kind of poof. And that's not what this is about. It has other things going on. I really do get that sort of stewed apple strudel kind of a thing that I can only assume is coming from the apple brandy. Yeah, I really like that. If you want soft throat smoke with a fruity undertone for a really good price, again, this is 6 years age, same as the Kundao. This is the Shanyu, and yeah, again, a fantastic price. This one's even less than the Kundao, so you can get this right now. Regular price $60.78, and again, we only brought 60 of these into the country. From what I understand, is still to this point, only 60 of these have ever left China. So get it while you can. $60.78, and with 10% off, that makes it $54.70. So yeah, I really, really, really like these whiskies. Again, I'm not expecting the world of them. They're a new distillery. It's 6 years old. You can't expect this to be, Macallan 21 level of quality here. But from what they bring to the table, for the price that they bring it to, with the packaging that they bring it in, and for the story and the really interesting techniques that they're using, this is so good. This is so cool. This is so interesting. And it makes me really optimistic about the kind of whiskies that we're going to get from China in the future. I think that they could absolutely be spoken about in 20 years' time the same way that we currently speak about Indian whiskey. Because if you go back to 2005 and try and tell people about Indian whiskey, they would laugh you out of the place. But these days, people like Amrut, people like Paul John, they've really made a name for Indian single malt whiskey. And yeah, I could really, if this is the kind of quality that the first single malt whiskies coming out of China are, I really look forward to seeing what follows. Yeah, beautiful. All right, on to the final whiskey of our trilogy. And you can again come and try this in store. This one's $2 to come and sample. This is the absolutely wonderful 10-year-old. This is the oldest Chinese whiskey ever made, and it's from the distillate of the first ever Chinese whiskey ever made. Single malt ever made, I should stipulate. There may have been other styles of whiskey, but from what I understand, Gisbelle was the first ever company in China to make a single malt whiskey, and this is their oldest stocks. This is the 10-year-old, which is super cool. So I keep mispronouncing the name because we had a similar whiskey in the first batch, which I don't know if they still make, that was their 8-year-old called Konzen. This has dropped the N. This is Kozen, apparently. Beautiful wooden box and same style decanter as you got there in the Kundao. So this one is, again, Mongolian oak for 10 whole years. That ex-apple brandy. Some of the literature I have says apple cider, and that's actually what I've got on the website right now. I think I might change that because from other literature I find they don't use apple cider, they only use apple brandy. So I think, again, that was a translation mishap. I will try and find out more. If you have any questions about these whiskies, I might not be able to answer them yet, but I can certainly try and ask my contacts. We'll see if we can find an answer. And actually, on that, I'm planning to do a interview video with someone from the distillery in the future as well. So this is video one. There will be more videos with Gisbelle, or Symbol, or whatever you want to call their whiskies. So sandalwood kind of flavors is what they're aiming for here, and that's the kind of flavor profile that you can only really get through aging. So 10 years, the oldest batch, is what they're going with. Triple distilled, exactly the same methodology as the others. Obviously, no peat in this one, but 10 years aged. Absolutely beautiful. So small batch, super rare, limited edition. Ooh, there we go. I say limited edition. This batch obviously is limited edition because it's amongst the first they've ever done. I assume they will continue making a 10-year-old in the future. I should also mention that we're using 2025 Victoria Whisky Festival Glencairn glasses for our tasting here today, so it makes me feel like I'm back at the festival. Lovely. Ooh, may have poured myself a little heavy there, sorry. These decanter-style bottles are kind of really hard to just pour a little dram out of. Yeah, that's beautiful. So, the slight youthful roughness, the spirit kind of forward flavors of these two aren't here in the 10-year-old. 10 years is a good amount of time for a whiskey. A lot of those subtractive maturation the things you want to take out of the whiskey have come out, the bad sort of chemically flavors, and it has had time to impact the whiskey with additive flavors from the cask as well, and it's just really quite impressive. Because it's not like a super different climate to Scotland, it's on the same sort of latitude. I should mention geographically wise, Yansai is right by the what's that sea called there? Is it the Yellow Sea? I think the sort of the sea that's in between China and Korea, and it's basically the same latitude as like South Japan or South Korea, and it's not overly hot. It's not, we're not talking Amrut style maturation here. It's much more in line with Scotland with that, or maybe like North America. And like by North America, I don't mean the continent. I mean the north of the country, United States of America. You know. So yeah, this is like maybe smells a little bit older than a 10-year-old equivalent Irish or Scottish, maybe. I think that's just from the particularly active cask. You know, it's not second fill or refill. It's a first fill ex-apple brandy, assumed, cask that is in Mongolian oak. So there is a decent amount of cask influence going in there. But it has had certainly enough time to round it off and get rid of the rough edges. Sandalwood's an interesting tasting note because I can't really say what it's like other than it's like sandalwood. You know, if you ever like smelt sandalwood incense or like had an aftershave that has that sandalwood note, it's a really interesting note, and this definitely captures that. But I would also say for people who are like, that means nothing to me, other flavors that I'm getting along in here do include things like cotton candy, you know, lighter, sugary kind of flavors. Includes things on that sort of slightly more tropical but not overly acidic. This is more acidic-y tropical fruit kind of things. This is softer tropical fruit. This is more like bananas maybe, or like a cantaloupe. Not that cantaloupes are particularly tropical, I don't think. Yeah, banana. I'm actually definitely getting banana now, actually. And there is a wood spiciness to it as well. There's like clove and cinnamon. It's definitely a darker tasting whiskey than the sherry cask, which feels so opposite to how it should be. Everything in my mind that's talking about like how these whiskeys are made, the sherry cask should be a darker flavor. The Mizunara, basically, cask equivalent, should be a lighter, brighter flavor. And it's just not. And that's really interesting. Yeah. Ooh, that was an interesting. I just got something really vegetal on the nose that time. Because that's the other thing. These are like soft and approachable, but there is a degree of complexity, and that really ramps up in the 10-year-old. What was that? I think that was like celery salt. Oh yeah, it smells like the stuff you rim a Clamato glass with. You know, the Malt's like Clamato rimmer. It's like celery, salt, and pepper. And maybe like a little bit of chili. And weirdly now I'm kind of, and this might just be, you know, thoughts impregnating my brain from the words I just said, but it kind of smells a little tomato-y now. Yeah, I can't get Caesar out of my head as I smell this now, which is super weird because that's like such a specific thing. We're back to candy floss. We're all right. The candy shell around M&Ms. Not the chocolate. Ignore the chocolate, but just the shell part, you know? This surprises me. This really does surprise me. Because, you know, like I said, especially about these two, like, they're good for what they are. And, you know, don't expect a massive amount of quality. It's a new distillery and it's a young whiskey. But this punches above expectations. It really does. There's not many... This is a 40% ABV. There's not many sort of accountant strength, as some people in the industry call it. Accountant strength 10-year-old whiskies that I would say are better than this. Like, don't get me wrong, they're definitely awesome, but this is not just like cool for what it is. This is actually, I think, a pretty good whiskey in general. It's different and it's interesting, and it's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And there's definitely going to be some people that are like, oh, well, it's not traditional enough for me. It does things weirdly, and there are flavors in there that I'm not wanting in a whiskey or expecting in a whiskey. But, you know, if you're, you know, have a slightly more curious palate, and I've always said that fortune favors the curious. This is a really interesting one to try, and I very much recommend that you do. So if you do get the chance to swing by the Strath in the next couple of months and give this whiskey a try, we'd love to serve one to you. And we'd love to sell you a bottle as well, because we actually got a large allocation of this. We got 120 bottles of this, and again, to the best of my knowledge, those are the only 120 bottles that have ever been exported from China. We are kind of the test market here. We have the exclusive. So, we'd love to get your opinions on this. If you do buy a bottle, please let us know in the comments what you personally think of this whiskey, or these two whiskeys, of course. But this, the oldest and one of the first ever batches of single malt whiskey from China, matured in Mongolian oak and all of that, is available right now at strathliquor.com for $121.65, which is great. Steal of a deal. Like, I'd never seen a whiskey in a wooden box for that price. But $121.65 is the full price. And of course, it's a featured whiskey right now. So for approximately 2 months after this video goes out, you can get it for 10% off, making it $109.49. $109.49. Yeah. Yeah, I'm super stoked to be able to share these weird and wonderful budget-friendly whiskies with you guys. I know that the whiskey industry is in a bit of an odd place right now. We're not entirely sure what direction things are going in, but if there's one thing that we can count on, is that people like something new and different and interesting, especially when it's at a good price. So hopefully you guys will support this project. And as I said, as the first video of the year, it's going to be heck of a year for whiskey here at the Strath. We have made a deal with a new independent bottler. Well, actually, no, not a new independent bottler. An independent bottler that's been around for a very long time, but it's going to be new to the market here. We're bringing in some absolutely incredibly well-priced single cask whiskies and small batch whiskies through them that we'll be releasing later this year. Our next single cask from Scotland is probably currently being bottled right now. I just approved the label a week or two ago. We have a Glen Scotia coming. It is a sherry cask Glen Scotia. I think it's an 8-year-old that will be launching later this year. I can't wait to share that with you guys. We've got more local whiskies coming out soon. You might have heard the news that Divine are unfortunately unable to continue producing whiskey. We have a wonderful little project to say goodbye to Divine, because I think we've bottled 7 or 8 different single cask Divines over the last few years. So we want to give them a proper goodbye. So we've bottled a final pair of Glensaddich local single malts. One that is from the last ever batch that made it to 3 years old. So just over 3-year-old single malt done in an ex-Buffalo Trace cask. And one from the first ever year of production. I think it's like cask 7 or 8 or something. A super early on cask that's now over 7 years old. So some of the oldest single cask stuff ever from Divine that was done in a ex-Woodford Reserve cask. So that is going to be the Sunset and Sunrise editions, our final exclusive Divine releases, which we're really looking forward to. We've also got mixtape number 2 coming out from Phillips, and if you thought the first one was weird, we're upping the ante with mixtape number 2. I look forward to sharing that with you guys soon. And I'm working with another local distillery for the sequel, I guess, to the Spirit of the Deep, working with Fathom, the bar at the Hotel Grand Pacific, where the Victoria Whisky Festival happens every year. And we're working to have even more wonderful, cool exclusives in time for the festival's 20th anniversary in 2026. Thank you all for tuning in. It has been a delight. I will see you in the next video or the next tasting. Check out the page, the Whiskey Folk page at strathliquor.com for upcoming tasting details. I should be launching tickets for an upcoming tasting probably the same day as I'm releasing this video. Get your tickets and I'll see you there. Slasher. Stay well.